Hello and welcome to Parkessent. My name's Jake, and today I've compiled a review of each of the major roller coasters at Flamingo Land Resort in North Yorkshire. Now then, the first review you're going to see is of Sick, the most recent roller coaster at Flamingo Land, and then there'll be Velocity, then Kumali, then Hero, and finally Mumbo Jumbo at the end. So if you do go on to enjoy this video, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll get straight in with the first one. Here we go. Sick. Sick is a roller coaster at Flamingo Land Resort in North Yorkshire. It's been operating since July 2022. It reaches a top speed of 53 miles an hour, which is a height of 108.3 feet, and includes 10 inversions. It includes one vertical loop, one cobra roll, a double corkscrew, and five heartline rolls. Despite opening at Flamingo Land in 2022, the ride was initially planned to open at Hopi Hari, which is a theme park located in Brazil. But it was never built due to the park's ongoing financial issues. The ride then sat in storage until 2017 when it was relocated to Movie Animation Park Studios, where, due to financial issues, it sat in storage once again. Then in 2019, the roller coaster was bought by Gordon Gibb and relocated to Flamingo Land, where, following the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns of 2020 and 2021, it finally opened to the public on the 2nd of July. Now, straight out of the station, you're hit with a cable lift hill, which is exceptionally fast. You then head straight into the banked drop and into a vertical loop. From there, you go down into a pit underground before emerging into a cobra roll, then back into the pit. Usually these pits are full of mist, which is quite a cool experience and a very cool effect in my opinion. You're then hit by the double corkscrew, which is very forceful, very intense. It's one of my favourite sections, but we'll get onto that very shortly. Then you're then hit by a banked turn 180 degrees, and then 4 heartline rolls in a row. Hold on, is my advice for this. You're then hit by another banked turn and another heartline roll into the station. Now, where do I start on Sick? Let's start with the theming. So, on entering the Sick shop, you walk through the queue line. You get some great views of Velocity, some really good views of Sick as well. There is a single rider queue, which is very good. There's also a separate accessibility queue, which is also very good. And you walk into the station. The station's kind of themed sort of nightclub-ish, I would say. There's loud music, lots of lights. It's very loud in there. It's all colourful. Outside the station, however, there is absolutely no theming on this ride. Now, don't get me wrong. It is well presented and it's nicely kept. It's been quite well maintained over the past couple of years. It's been open, but it's very barren. Other than the final bank at the end, where there's a lake to the left, that was completely man-made. It wasn't there before. And you occasionally get the fountain effect, but that's been hit and miss. There just isn't anything. Now then, the ride itself is a really good experience. It's intense from the get-go. The cable lift hill gives you a lot of momentum going into the drop, which makes it just provides some really good forces. When you curve at the bottom of that drop, you really get pushed down into your seat, and then to go straight into a vertical loop just provides some great. It's just really intense, yeah. The underground sections, again, when you're sort of cresting down there, it's oh. Now the next thing I'm going to touch on is the operations. Now, I feel sorry for the staff that work on Sick in a way because they only get given one train. It's a very popular ride, so the queue line can often exceed an hour, if not 45 minutes an hour, on a regular basis. They only have one train at any time. The ride's only really designed to hold one train, which is unusual compared to the other coasters of this type. I ran a little experiment to myself once because I have no friends. I took my phone out and with a stopwatch, I timed the amount of time between each between each train being sent out, and there was at least 5 minutes every single time. And you've got to think it holds 24 riders, and if you figure that out, the sort of throughput is a little bit bad. It's obviously nothing against the staff, you can't do anything about it, but it just seems like a big oversight on Flamingo Land's part, not designing it for a larger throughput. This ride also suffers a lot of downtime. There was at least 4 or 5 occasions where I visited the park last year and Sick wasn't open. It's had a lot of downtime for a coaster that's only been open for 2 years. Quite rough in a few sections. Certainly, the final 5 Heartline Bowls are, if you for a taller rider like myself, uh, it's exceptionally uncomfortable. You do feel like you can be flung out of the train at most points during that section. It's just very rattly and a bit. It's complete head basher. I'm very glad that it has lap bars and not overhead restraints because I can imagine that would be even more painful. The rest of the ride's pretty smooth, but it is just the final 5 inversions that let it down, unfortunately. You get some good views on the coaster, however, because the trains are tiered, similarly to Oblivion and Alton Towers. So every car has a lower seat and a higher set of seats, which gives everyone the same views, which is good. Yeah, I think the fact that all the track was sat in storage for such a long time and exposed to different climates when it was in Brazil and then at Movie Park Animation Studios, I think it's been exposed to a lot of elements, especially in 2 different countries. You got to think this ride isn't new. It's undoubtedly had an effect on the profiling of the track, which might be the reason why the Heartland roads are so uncomfortable. But obviously, I don't know that. I'm not an engineer, so I'm just going based on what I think. Now then, would I recommend Sick? Yeah, you might not enjoy it. It's definitely a roller coaster. I think it's definitely worth doing if you're at the park. It's not my favorite roller coaster on site. I do prefer Kumali, but there'll be a separate review on that coming up very soon. From the moment you step into the queue line, from the moment you exit, get the shop at the end, it's just an experience. I think it's definitely worth doing. Yeah. Yeah. Hello and welcome to Parkessent. My name's Jake, and today we're going to be discussing velocity at Flamingo Land. Accelerating from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 2.8 seconds, Velocity is Flamingo Land's launched motorbike coaster, which opened at the park in 2005. Velocity was the second of Vecoma's motorbike coasters to be built, and to this day remains the only coaster of its kind in the UK. Riders are seated on motorbikes in something like a bike riding position, with a back restraint to ensure that they remain secure. This restraint is lowered by pulling the handlebars towards the rider, which is quite unique and you don't see it on many coasters. Velocity has a top speed of roughly 60 miles per hour. It reaches a height of 57 feet and contains 2,152 feet of track. Now then, the ride commences out of the station and around a 180-degree unbanked turn. Out of this turn, you are loaded into the launch bay. Now, you're held here for quite a few seconds, around 10 seconds or so, whilst the sound effect is played. This sound effect is the revving of a motorbike engine, although it doesn't always work, so sometimes you just sat there in silence, like this. But eventually the launch does hit and you're rocketed at 60 miles per hour roughly through a straight piece of track over a massive airtime hill. You bank down into the first corner. Now this corner is really intense. Into the second corner, which is equally as intense, and then into the third corner, which is, believe it or not, quite intense. You then go over a little sort of jagged airtime hill into a straight airtime hill, onto another straight airtime hill, and into the brakes, back round into the station. Now, this coaster doesn't last very long. It's about a minute long, but in that time, it packs in quite a few elements, as you saw. The launch is fantastic. The turns are intense. There's some brilliant views of the other coasters at the park, and it's just an all-around great experience. Now, where to start with Velocity? Well, let's start with the theming. The theming, there kind of isn't any. As with a couple of the coasters at Flamingo Land, the theming is very barren. The focus is definitely on the ride experience as opposed to the sort of immersion and sort of storyline that a lot of other parks try and focus on. With Velocity, you are literally entering a queue line, going up a cattle pen, getting on the coaster, and getting off again. There's no sort of build up. There's no real immersion. There are now some banging tunes playing in the station. They were introduced a few years ago, the sort of hard rock 70s, 80s, kind of that sort of music. They blast all day in the station. Good songs, get you in the mood for riding a motorbike, I guess. So yeah, the theming is a little bit barren, but it's certainly made up for with the ride experience. Now, The highlight of the ride is, of course, the launch. Now, this is the case with a lot of Vekoma launch coasters. The launch is fantastic. It's really forceful. It is a hydraulic launch, so it's not a gradual ascent into the launch, so like Icon at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. No, this is an immediate launch, and you're really pushed back into your seat. It's fantastic. And going from the launch into the first airtime hill provides some brilliant forces. The best force of the entire ride, one of my favorite moments, is after that massive airtime hill when you're banking round into the side. That is extremely intense, and you're really pushed down into your seat. It's a fantastic element. As for the operations on Velocity, they've always been pretty solid. It only ever ran one train, but it seats 16 riders, and with the nature of the ride being quite a fast and short experience, it only lasts about a minute. You can easily get maybe 40 trains out in an hour. If you work that out, it's about 500 riders an hour, which is pretty good for Flamingo Land standards. Unfortunately, Velocity has been facing quite a lot of downtime in the last few seasons. I know it was closed for the first couple of months of this past season, and that has been the case in many seasons before. However, it is open most days in the main season. I must admit the operations on Velocity are pretty what's the word? Consistent. They're pretty consistent. Let's go with that. Now I want to talk about the comfort. Um, it's quite unnatural Velocity. The way you sit in the car, you kind of have to put your arms forward and you sort of leaning forward a little bit. Now it's quite uncomfortable on sort of forceful bits because, as I said before, you really get pushed down into that seat and there's not much padding, unfortunately. It can be exceptionally rough on your arms, especially. You got to think if your arms are pulling forward all the time, especially with the forces that you get, it can be quite uncomfortable. But that doesn't take away from the experience, in my opinion. For a lot of people, it would. Not me. Nevertheless, it is a good ride. It's definitely worth doing if you're at the park. I wouldn't queue more than maybe half an hour for it. The queues can easily reach that on sort of a busier day. The biggest queue I've ever seen for it has been upwards of an hour and a half. At that point, they shut off the ride sometimes just because of capacity and getting people around. So they have been known to shut the ride due to the queue length. And it's not the best ride at Flamingo Land, but it does its job. It's a brilliant supporting ride. Hello and welcome to Parkessent. My name's Jake, and today we're going to be discussing Kumali at Flamingo Land. Now, Kumali opened in 2006 at a cost of £6 million. It contains 4 inversions, which include a vertical loop, a cobra wall, and a corkscrew across 2,200 feet of track. The coaster is 117 feet tall and reaches a top speed of 55 miles per hour, which makes it the fastest roller coaster at Flamingo Land. Fact for you, Kumali used to operate with 2 trains, but the second train was dismantled in 2009 for unknown reasons. The coaster was named after Flamingo Land's head lion at the time of opening. Did you know that? You might have done. It's pretty common knowledge. Straight out of the station, you're hit with the 117-foot tall lift hill, which provides some spectacular views of the park and the Yorkshire countryside. It also takes quite a while to get to the top. From there, you bank right into an enormous drop with some amazing forces at the bottom before heading straight into a vertical loop. From the bottom of the vertical loop, you're then straight into a cobra roll, and although you don't get much time to appreciate it, you get some spectacular views of the neighbouring lakes. Then coming out of the cobra roll, you're hit with a small section of track before going into the 4th and final inversion, which is a corkscrew. You then dive down from the corkscrew up a massive upwards helix and into the brake run. Now, Mount Kumali is quite an intense coaster. As soon as you hit that drop, there's some fantastic lateral forces. You get really pinned down into your seat. It's fantastic. Just with the speed and the momentum that it completes the rest of the layout, it's certainly quite an intense and thrilling coaster. In terms of theming, Kumali's pretty bare. I'll be honest. It's well kept. The entrance, there's a sort of entrance like portal type thing with the words Kumali written on the top. That's quite cool. But other than that, there isn't any theming at all. In the past 5 years or so, they did add a soundtrack to the station. I'm not sure if it's a custom soundtrack or not, but it's a soundtrack and it fits, so I can't complain with that really. But yeah, other than that, it is it's just a roller coaster in a field in terms of theming. There's nothing to suggest that there's any sort of storyline, or it's not blended very well into the area, if you know what I mean. But it is a fantastic coaster nonetheless. The operations on Kumali have always been pretty consistent, I would say. And up until the year 2009, it did actually run 2 trains. It hasn't had that much of a negative impact though, because the trains are quite big. You can get 20 riders on a train, and the cycle's not too long. It's got a pretty good throughput for an SLC. So now that I've said that, I can see why they got rid of the second train. Now, with a lot of the Vekoma SLCs around the world, Kumali has a little bit of a rattle to it here and there, so to speak. It's not rough by any standard, but it is you do get a little bit of head banging, although it is a lot smoother than the other SLCs we've got in the country, such as Infusion, which is washing machine like. Even the Odyssey is quite rough now. So with that in mind, I would definitely say that Kumali is the best Vekoma SLC in the country. Although there's not much in it between Kumali and the Odyssey, but that's a point for another video. Now, is Kumali worth doing? Definitely, yes. My favourite place to sit is at the front left specifically, because the views are a little bit better. Rating out of 10, I'll probably give this coaster an 8. It is better than Mumbo Jumbo. It is, in my opinion, it is the best ride at Flamingo Land. It's better than Sick. You can see my opinions of Sick on the channel. I'll hopefully leave a link in the description if I remember to, or maybe even an info card. If not, they're on the channel. Subscribe. And yeah, it's just an all-round good coaster. Just in terms of the experience, you know, it's intense. It's well kept. It's not well themed, but it doesn't matter. It's fast. It's strong. It's got good inversions. It's got a good throughput. It's just It's just a solid coaster, and it was a really good addition to the lineup at Flamingo Land, in my opinion. Hello and welcome to Parkessent. My name's Jake, and today we're going to be discussing Hero. Now, Hero is a Zamperla Volair located at Flamingo Land that opened in 2013 on the site of the former Wild Mouse coaster at a cost of £8 million. Hero was the 10th roller coaster of this model to open and was the third flying coaster to open in the UK. It reaches a top height of 50 feet and has a track length of 1,300 feet and reaches a top speed of 25.7 miles per hour. Hero features 2 inversions, which are both heartline rolls, as well as a multitude of twists, dips, and turns. Hero is one of just 20 coasters in the world to feature a spiral lift. This is a style of lift hill that is shaped like an upward spiral. Unlike a conventional lift hill, a spiral lift is physically pushed by a rotating structure in the middle of the spiraling track. As with most coasters, Hero begins by exiting out of the station. You're given a little bit of a push, and then you're eventually joined onto the spiral lift hill. Now, this section is kind of like the calm before the storm, unfortunately. You're given a couple of maybe 20 seconds to appreciate the views and question your choices, so to speak, whilst you make your way up this lift hill. From this hill, you get some brilliant views of the park, you get some great views of the coasters, excellent views of Velocity and Sick. Unfortunately, though, you're not given much time to appreciate them, because as soon as you get to the top of the lift hill, you're hit by a tiny trim brake to kind of get you in the mood, and then you go down the first drop, which is all right, and then bang, you're into the first corner and the first inversion. Now, this section is exceptionally rough, but I will get onto that in a minute. You then head around a corner, do a little dip and another turn, and then you're hit with the second inversion. Again, you can see by the POV how uncomfortably rough that this is. You then go around another corner, and you're into the worst section of the ride, which is a swooping section. There's a couple of dips and a couple of turns here, and it weaves in and out of itself before finally making its way into the brake run and back into the station. Where do I start on Hero? I'm going to start with the theming. Now, the theming on Hero is very minimalistic, as with every coaster at Flamingo. There's a decent entrance portal as you enter the queue line. Other than that, there's no theming. I'm saying this about most of the coasters at Flamingo Land, but it is well kept. It's tidy, usually. It's quite clean. It's, yeah, you know, it's not like it's just dumped there. It's intentionally built. Track fits in well. It's got a nice color scheme. Unfortunately, that's where the positives for this coaster end. It is exceptionally rough. It's got a reputation for being the worst coaster in the UK, and It pains me to say it, but it really does deserve it, unfortunately. From the moment you go around that first corner at the top to the moment you get to the brake run, there is non-stop rattling. You're thrown about in the train. I think it doesn't help that the trains don't keep you very still. They are quite forgiving, which very unusually is a bad thing in this case, because you do actually you actually move about in the cage, especially on those inversions. It's horrible. Before I delve into the roughness of Hero too much, I'm going to talk about the boarding procedure. Now, you might think it's a roller coaster. Surely you just get on and go. Well, that is not the case with Hero. You see, the trains are constantly moving, so you have to board the train whilst it's moving in the station. It's quite stressful sometimes, to be honest. So if you've got a bag, you have to run to the other side of the station, chuck your bag down, and run onto the train. You go up some steps, put your hands on the holders, hold on for dear life. It's not very tight, and it doesn't give you the best of confidence, if that makes sense. For a ride like that, I think I'd expect to be strapped in a bit tighter. A restraint system like the one on Galactica or on Towers would be fantastic, although I know it's a very different ride on a completely different scale. However, I must say that because of the boarding procedure and the fact that the trains never stop, the queue times for Hero can be pretty good. I'd say on a busy day you can be waiting max an hour, which is the worst case scenario. If there's an hour long queue for Hero, go somewhere else. But most of the time, the queue doesn't go out of its first corner. From that point, it's probably about a 20-minute wait, which isn't too bad. Now, is Hero as bad as everyone says? Yes, it's definitely an experience, but I think the roughness really lets it down, unfortunately. I don't know why they chose to import a Zamperla Valère when they had a pretty solid Wild Mouse coaster there before. The Wild Mouse was relocated to Pleasurewood Hills, and I can't help but say that they got the better end of this deal. So what's good about it? The views are all right, great. Other than that, it's just a terrible coaster. It's definitely worth doing, but it's worth doing once, in my opinion. It's a roller coaster for the credit list and not much more than that, unfortunately. I will never understand people who say it's their favourite coaster at Flamingo Land. Those people are weird, but hey, each to their own. It's fair enough. Hello and welcome to Parkessent. My name is Jake, and today we're going to be talking about Mumbo Jumbo. Mumbo Jumbo is a roller coaster located at Flamingo Land Resort in Yorkshire. It's been operating since 2009. Now, Mumbo Jumbo is an L Loco model built by American manufacturer S&S. It was the second coaster of its kind. It has a height of 98.4 feet, features two, arguably three inversions, we'll get onto that. It reaches 4 Gs of force and features a 112-degree drop. It cost £4 million to construct, and at the time of opening, it was the world's steepest roller coaster. Fun fact for you before we get into the meat of the video, the park owners said that the name Mumbo Jumbo is a tongue-in-cheek description of how other parks boast about their new coasters. Interesting fact there for you. You might not have known it. Subscribe. Now, let's talk about the ride experience. Upon exiting the station, you're immediately hit with a 180-degree turn, and then you slowly begin to climb up the lift hill. Now, as soon as you get onto the chain itself, the lift hill is exceptionally fast. It's also quite steep, so you kind of get pushed back onto your back quite a lot. It's a strange sensation. After this, you are given an unbanked turn at the top of the lift hill, which makes you feel like you're going to fall out and be flung off the side. You're then hit with that 112-degree drop straight out of the turn. Now this drop's exceptionally good, so forceful, and it's quick as well. This is where the arguably three inversions comes into play. I would say you're technically upside down on that drop, but let me know your thoughts in the comments. After this, you go quite a steep turn into a bit of a unique section where you sort of tilt from side to side, and then you're held upside down for a couple of seconds before ascending a drop into another turn. Now this section is a little bit uncomfortable, but we'll get onto the review in a minute. After this drop, I suppose you could call it a dive loop, but it's not really. You go up into a brake section and you go around another corner before completing a corkscrew and a massive overbanked turn back into the station. Now, first thing I'd like to say is that this is a very thrilling coaster. It's a fantastic coaster. It's definitely worth doing. It's not very smooth, unfortunately, which is to be expected for like a 14-year-old coaster. Now, before you even get on the ride, I want to talk about the theming. Now, it's very minimalist. You go through a big sort of entrance portal thing. There's these little sort of Mayan characters, but they're very loosely dotted about. And there's a couple on the top, but I think that's it. Operations on this coaster are a little bit hit and miss. So the throughput on an S&S or Loco is always going to be low due to the small cars and just the way the block sections work on the track. You can be waiting upwards of 2 hours on a quiet day for Mumbo Jumbo, or on a reasonably quiet day. They don't tend to put on more than 2 trains, which is a little infuriating. Spending half your day in the queue line for Mumbo Jumbo. They also don't have a separate load and dispatch bay anymore. They used to. So there used to be like a separate place to get off and get on, and you could get people on and off at the same time, which made it a little bit quicker. They stopped doing that due to COVID, and then it just hasn't seemed to pick back up again. Now then, another thing to note with Mumbo Jumbo, if you are over the height of about 3-4 foot, it is quite uncomfortable. So the restraints are really bulky, and you kind of get stapled a little bit. It's quite uncomfortable on the shoulders, especially when you're being held upside down for a couple of seconds. It can be exceptionally rough as well at some points. Sort of the overbanked turn at the end of the track profiling on there is a little bit presumptuous, to say the least. Most of the ride's fine, but as I said, it does dig into your shoulders, which it hurts quite a lot, especially as a taller person like myself. The ride experience as a whole, however, is definitely worth doing. Maybe wait until the queue is below 45 minutes to experience this attraction, because as I said, the operations can be exceptionally slow on this attraction. What would I rate this coaster out of 10? Probably a 7 I would go for. I think if you're going to the park, it's definitely worth doing. It's a really good coaster. I wouldn't do it more than once in a day, but just the overall experience, and it's definitely worth doing, I think. Let me know your thoughts on this coaster down in the comment section below. Please have an argument with me over how many inversions it has. That's all from me. I know this has been quite a brief review, but got things to do. And that's a lie. I don't have anything to do today. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more, then make sure to subscribe. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.